And
Can we use a mic or should I just talk? It's a small room.
It's a small room. We'll give it to the non-mic. If you want mic, just let us know. We'll pick it up and get it over to Mark.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hello. So I'm here to talk to you about percussive audio cubes, and thanks, Mark, for letting me talk about these. They're a really unusual interface. There are not that many in the U.S. They're sold from a company in Belgium, and what they are is a tangible interface. So I'm going to give you a little overview about what they are. I'm going to play a little using the cubes and answer questions at the end. So as you can see a little bit here, I can't project, so you're going to have to look at my laptop because of the way I'm docked. But a tangible interface is an interface that interacts with your hands or objects, and more importantly, each other. So all these cubes down here, which I'll light up in a second, can interact with each other, so they understand how the relationship and positioning from cube to cube. And then they also interact with your software like Ableton Live. And before these cubes came out, they're about 2 years old, there were tangible interfaces before percussive audio cubes. And the picture here you can see is of something called Reactable. And you've probably seen Microsoft Surface. And Reactable, before cubes, what it took to do this sort of an interface was typically a table with a special surface and treatment. They have icons on the different sides. There's cameras above and below, projectors and cameras. So I think they go for around $10,000. And they're not easy to move, because if you move the table, you've got to calibrate everything again. So certainly there's other implementations. So this is a picture of Bert. He founded Percussa after spending some time at the Karma Labs. And his goal was to take that interface and shrink it down and make it infrastructureless, so you don't need the projectors and the cameras and the tables and all these things. So that's what I have in my hand. And the idea was to make it fit in a backpack. I don't know if you can see that. I'll just walk around a little bit. So cubes have 4 sides, and you can see there's a USB jack. And they are an autonomous computer. You charge them through USB, and then they can run for 4 or 5 hours just on their own. So each cube has, if you can see this little picture over here, inside of it is a computer that was specifically developed to replace all that gadgetry that it took to run something like Reactable. And the 4 faces can receive information wirelessly, cube to cube. They also have infrared, so as you're moving your hand or objects into the faces, that turns into controller data. And so there's really 3 modes these cubes run in. One is called sensor mode. So this cube I have, and cubes are completely configurable. They're all little computers. So this cube's actually running in sensor mode. And you can see as I get my hand closer, the light changes. I'll show you in a minute, but this is actually sending MIDI continuous controller data, like a mod wheel, from 0 to 127. Each cube face is a different controller. So that's a sensor cube. The other types of modes are sender and receiver. So the one I have in my hand is a sender cube. And its only job is to send information. So if I put this cube next to this cube, the 2 faces recognize each other, and then they send out a MIDI note. If I turn the cube and then put it next to this face, it sends a different MIDI note. So the idea is between using nothing but MIDI in Ableton, something we're all used to, right? You can MIDI map what the cubes are doing to Ableton Live. So there's a free app called MIDI Bridge, and MIDI Bridge allows you to map all the parameters of the cubes. Let me alt-tab here. So there's MIDI Bridge actually running. If I put my finger over it, you'll see, let me select cube 1. It's a little hard to see on this small screen, but you'll see that it's sensing my hand motion. There's a little graph here. And I can map inside of MIDI Bridge what information is going to Ableton Live. So it seems a little intimidating, but it isn't really. There's only 3 modes. You bring up the screen. You say, oh, when I put my hand over this side of the interface, that's MIDI controller 22. And then you go into Ableton Live, and then you MIDI map, put your hand over the interface, and boom, now you're linked to Ableton Live. It's really that simple. So you have to run this intermediate piece of software. Now once you do that, you can send MIDI information to devices, parameters and devices, but also VSTs. As Mark mentioned, I'm a real fanatic for virtual instruments, and once you map an instrument into a device rack in Ableton Live, you can then expose the parameters to the cubes. So in this example, it's hard to see, I could map a cube face to, that's Alchemy, And Alchemy has this control matrix, so I could radically change the sound simply by moving my hand to one side of the cube. I could take it from a bell to like a shredded metal sound, and I have continuous control. It's almost like using a theremin, but the throw is really short. When you use your fingers, it's like that long. So, like anything, it takes practice, right? You just can't jump in and start using the cube. So, also there are light sources. So there's a LED inside of here, and then there's a inside of this surface. It's designed to uniformly reflect the light. And how you get light to it is you send dummy MIDI clips. You can see I've got a build going here. So in MIDI Bridge, you configure how the cubes receive the information. So by default, it's continuous controller 14, 15, 16, red, green, blue. You go into Ableton Live, you create a MIDI clip, and then you go to controller 14 and you draw a curve, which turns the light on and off. So what do they cost? You can't see that screen. How much do you think that costs? How much would you pay now? 200 bucks, that's right. One cube is $200. And you might say, wow, I could get a launch pad for that. But you have to remember that this is a reduction of $10,000 down to $200 per cube. So when you think of it that way, you say, wow, that's actually not bad. You also don't have to start with 4. You could buy 1. And there's all sorts of other applications that come with it, and I'll talk about them in a second. But you could just use 1 cube and a DJ act to do scratching. They have, like MIDI Bridge is a free app called Decadance that lets you use it with Decadance, and you can use it basically with any host. So one of the things they offer you for free is a whole boatload of applications. So I'm talking about MIDI Bridge tonight. There's an OSC bridge, so you don't have to use MIDI if you want to use OSC protocol. So you get bigger than 0 to 127 granularity. There's Decadance, there's a VST wrapper, there is something called Loop Shaper, where you can have 1 cube be a sound source and the other one be a modifier. And there's something called Modular, which they spent 2 years writing. And what it is, it doesn't even use a host. And think of it this way, is it's a MIDI processing network. And what you can do is hook up a MIDI controller, hook up all these cubes, VST on the other side of it, and you could say this cube is an arpeggiator. This is a 16th, this is a 32nd, this is a 64th, and when it's next to this cube, I want to do transposition, but only one on this face. So it gets kind of crazy, right? So they've done these big art installations where they have more than 4 cubes running these big networks, and you're dropping the cube in and it changes the signal flow. So what are they used for? Well, obviously for art experimentation. I'm going to show you how you can use it with Ableton Live, just to use it as a MIDI controller. One of the things I like about them is they give you visual feedback. So at the end of what I'm about to play you, I'm going to turn a delay on, and it's just going to be repeating what I was playing before. I'm going to set the cube down next to another cube, and you'll see the lights change color. Now I know I'm in a new scene, and the delay is holding the old scene, and if I take my hand off, it'll start playing the new scene. So it starts getting into Launchpad's a little bit this way, but you can start using it for visual cues for your own mixes, because sometimes it's easy to get lost. So let me tell you about this. I'm going to play a little song for you. I just wrote to demonstrate the cubes. I'll put live up there. It's called First Orbit, and let me explain my configuration, because you can make these any configuration you want. So these are receivers. This is a sender, and this is a sensor. This cube on this side, when I set this cube near it, it's going to detect it. And I'm using this for scene selection in Ableton Live. And if I'm on this side, I'm using it for sending MIDI notes to effects processors. Also, when I set my cube down over here in a minute, I'm going to be using that for changing the tempo of the arpeggiator. So I'll go from 16ths to 30 seconds and such, just by putting the cube down here. And on this side, I'm doing bit reduction. And on this side, I'm doing delay. And I'm changing the gate time of the arpeggiator. And on this side, I'm going to be changing the number of notes when I'm arpeggiating. If I just hold down 2 notes, it will play those notes. And then as I come closer to this side of the cube, I'm going to start moving it up through the 12 note range and on up as I move. So one of the coolest things about cubes, you can't do easily with other interfaces, is you can control 4 parameters at the same time with a sensor.